All right, everybody. Welcome back to RCTCreations. And in this video, we are going to be working on the downtown section of Houston Pleasant. This being Houston Pleasant episode 3, so odds are I'm probably going to be working on that park, and here we are. Video should be about 20 minutes long. I know you've probably been able to look at that, but I have to find something to talk about through that for that period of time. So we're going to jump right on into it. We're going to get started with the first coaster of the park in the park history, I guess. This was a pre-planned design. It's going to be a CCI family style wooden coaster. And I know I posted that poll about wanting to do maybe time lapses for like the scenery and kind of fitting out of the coaster, then live comms for the actual build. That poll was sent out well after I had already completed this ride. So I think from here on out, this should be the last coaster that I'm aware of. There might be one more actually, but it's not a very big ride. But we'll get that all set. So the layout's pretty simple. We start with a turnaround out of the station into about a 70-foot-ish lift. Finally taking advantage of the newer track pieces in OpenRCT2. They've been in the game for a while, actually since I started the Fun Corporation series, but the large steep to level drop is finally being utilized, and I'm very happy to see that in the game because it makes life that much easier when building these wooden coasters, and it makes them look that much smoother. But after that first drop, we're going to go into a left-hand turn and kind of dive back over the first drop. A lot of inspiration taken from the smaller wooden coasters built by Kings Island. I think there were quite a few. CCI even built one over at Michigan's Adventure called Zach Zoomer. But Kings Island has one. I think they call theirs Woodstock Express. Kings Dominion has one. I believe they call theirs Woodstocks Express or something just slightly different. But they all have kind of a similar layout. You start with the drop, you turn around, dip back over the first drop there, go into a turn. I did a double down into a turn back the other direction. And then we're going to start heading back over towards the final turnaround around the first turnaround off the first drop, then head right back into the station. Now, the brake run on this ride is a little unique. As you can see, we kind of start slowing it down, go into a drop, and then hit the ending brake runs there. And that is something you did see on CCI wooden roller coasters. As far as building in Roller Coaster Tycoon goes, CCI wooden coasters have to be some of my favorite. Either that or like the Monster Did wooden coasters. I have one of those. I've built one of those before. Just a lot of fun to put together. CCI's especially because CCI didn't like to bank their turns a lot, so you can kind of get some crazy lateral forces if you go in there. But outside of the layout, we head back towards the station. We get our transfer track built in. In CCI transfer tracks, most of them had the whole track slide over, so you'd have the whole train in place, and then the whole track with the train on it would slide over, and you could basically operate the ride either way. The Morgan brake runs, like I use for Xenon 200, very similar to that. Now, not all of them use that, but the late 90s, early 2000s ones definitely did. Ghost Rider would be an example of the opposite, and then a ride like Rampage at Alabama Adventure would be an example of the version used here. We're going to get the downtown North America theming in place here. The downtown section, of course, based off the one at Funland. Joyland had a much smaller version that just recently became even smaller with the addition of Xenon The Last Stand. But I believe this park is going to end up having the biggest of the downtown sections. But we got our little photo booth down there. It's kind of just an empty building, but I like to pretend there's a counter there for guests to go get their on-ride photos at the end, because there is an on-ride photo section featured on the ride, because who doesn't like to make a little bit of extra money? So we get a couple buildings in place. The only overflow actually for the new wooden coaster is actually in there. And then I had this crazy idea to build a couple of trams that kind of transport you throughout the section. This is by far the biggest downtown section between any of the three parks. Funland's pretty close because Funland kind of uses the huge downtown section, and then it also has like kind of a suburb style section, and I really kind of wanted to recreate that here. As you can see, we started with kind of a centerpiece of a road just like Funland featured. In fact, it was the exact same. But with the idea of the trams being there, I really wanted those to kind of be in the middle of the walkway there. So that's what I ended up doing. Took a little bit of trial and error for that. There was a bridge I really wanted to build over the top, but didn't like the look of it, and I thought it just was kind of bulky and didn't end up being a fan. But we're going to use this kind of basic roof structure that I used at the parking bridge and then at the ticketing gate or security gate at the front of the park. I really do kind of like the look of it. It's minimalistic, but it does serve a purpose. At the very beginning, it can look kind of ugly, but it really has grown on me. So I love using that just as kind of a basic structure. But we'll get the road placed back in there, and then we'll kind of get the trees removed, and we're going to place a couple more buildings to get them steady. Now, when it comes to buildings like these, I try not to keep them to be too, rectangular or square. Some square rectangular buildings are going to be common in downtown areas, so I want some, but I also wanted some unique designs. The building you're watching now actually ends up getting ripped down pretty quick because once I finished it, I really didn't like the way it stood too tall in front of like the Main Street area there. But it's one of those things where I built it and then came back later because I wasn't the biggest fan and wanted to change it up a little bit. But we're going to continue with our path down to the other tram station. Get their fence placed in, just kind of give a barrier for our guests to switch up a little bit and head down to the other side. And then after getting that path in place, I go back and we're going to start working on thinking about some buildings. But in reality, I'm going to go back over here and get the second tram station set up. So I wanted to make it look identical to the one at the other end of downtown. So we're going to get those steel pillars in place. I'm going to zoom out just to kind of get an ideal view of the area, and then use a little bit more just to kind of copy that design. Again, tried to make it identical. I think they end up being... The buildings themselves are identical, but the pathing around the outside is slightly different because it's just a little bit further out. I really did like the fact that I was able to keep the road path. I really wish that was something that was available in scenario plays more often, because you really can make kind of cool roads with that path heading down this way. But once I got that all settled in with the tram station, I wanted to put another tracked ride. I can't say the first tracked ride because we just did a roller coaster, but we want to get the log flume placed in here. Now for 2000, we're going to say Fun Corporation went with Intamin, although, I mean, in-game, all the log rides look identical, so it's not going to look much different than the ones that are supposed to be designed by Aero Development at both Funland and Joyland. But this one, by technicality, by storyboard, is going to be an Intamin little ride here. Little log flume, I should say. We're going to get our path laid out here. I kind of got a base for my station. I just wanted a general idea of what I wanted to do, and I didn't want the building to be too square, so I added a little bit of shape to the building on the outside. The final rendition of what I've got here, I didn't end up being a huge fan of. I was okay with kind of like the two building structure on the outside there, but the roofing I put over, I ended up redesigning. I can't remember off the top of my head. I've recorded a couple more parts to this as I'm recording this, and I can't remember if I recorded that in a video or it's just something I did off camera, but the final result of this building will end up looking slightly different. Every once in a while, if I get something I don't like in game, I get really lazy and just decide not to record it when I come back. So unfortunately, there are some things that will be a final result in some of my parks that will not be on camera because, long story short, I can be kind of lazy sometimes, so apologies for that. But we're going to get our building put together here, put our roof on top. Just becomes very, very square. I tried to kind of replicate the look I had with the Elk Ridge Adventure Train at Funland, but it just did not come together at all in the way I'd hoped. But eventually what I ended up doing was just taking the back off and putting more of that gray style slanted roof on the back. And I think it ended up looking better. We're going to switch over to the queue here, get a couple shade structures set up, and then put our shades in, and then build our overflow queue. So the log ride's name ends up being City Waterworks, so it just kind of builds into the downtown theme. It's the first log ride featured in the downtown area. Both the other initial log rides for the Fun Corporation parks were both featured in the Minetown section. However, Houston Pleasant is not going to open with a Minetown section. It's going to have a couple different ideas, although downtown I feel like is kind of the staple for all the parks. And with Houston Pleasant initially being focused on being a family park, the star attraction, the wooden coaster, which we end up calling Zephyr, ends up being the star attraction of Houston Pleasant, at least as initially planned. It probably will not end up working out that way, as in early 1998, there's some pretty significant news in the amusement industry in regards to the Six Flags parks. But we'll get to that a little later in the story here. And then another thing I end up coming back to later, I just really was not a fan. It's not even that I wasn't a fan of the way this building ended up looking. I think the building looks fine. However, it's placed way too close to the station. So I end up ripping this building down. This one I definitely did off camera, but I ripped the building down and then put it in the kind of along the the final drop there, just so it's further out of the way. But when you're building a park like this, I wanted to make sure I had a little maintenance bay that they could take the logs to if they need to work on something, or maybe they need to work on the rollers and the lift hill. Either way, just want to have a maintenance shop there. Moving on over here, we're going to put our first food stand in. Actually, our second food stand, because we will eventually have the city market located in downtown. No, this is the first food stand. I haven't done city market yet. Excuse me. I get myself all mixed up. But this is a carbon copy of the ones found at Funland and Joyland, although the one at Joyland no longer exists. But the building is exactly identical, so it's kind of basic, but it's just kind of a gas station themed place. As you can see in there, we have coffee, we have hot dogs, and we have soda. When you go on a road trip, you stop for something at a gas station, odds are you're going to grab a roller hot dog. If it's in the morning, you might grab a coffee. If it's in the afternoon or the evening, you might grab a soda. We're going to replicate that here. I've always kind of liked the idea of having a gas station at an amusement park, but I've never seen anyone do it. But the idea of getting a roller hot dog at an amusement park just was too cool for me to pass up. So after the transition there, we're going to switch over to continuing the downtown section, and I mentioned the city market, and this is where it is going to end up going. City market was featured at Funland. However, Joyland did not have a city market because Joyland's downtown section was really small. And I wanted the two parks to be different enough, but I wanted to kind of recreate that feeling for Houston Pleasant. So we're going to add a city market here. So you can get sub sandwiches, lemonade, or a soft pretzel at the city market in downtown Houston Pleasant. I think those two things fit pretty well together, or I guess three things fit pretty well together. So that is what I ended up going with. As far as gameplay goes, you don't necessarily want to stick two food stands near each other like that. Nor do you really want to stick two drink stands next to each other, because you want to kind of fit that in all the food stands. I believe by technicality within the game are the exact same. There's no difference between them. So yeah, you really don't, for like scenario play, you don't want to have them together. But in the interest of giving my guest options, I do end up doing it. Not great for making in-game money, but you know what? It's close enough. And then we're going to continue to kind of fill out the downtown section here. Just get a couple buildings, trying not to make them too square. Give them different roof heights just so they look a little more unique. I really like the look of these kind of downtown buildings. And the reason I ended up doing it this way, in the initial Fun Corporation parks I built back in 2012 in RCT3, for Cyclone at Funland, I used the Colonial theming set. And I really wanted to kind of keep that theming going into this game, but I didn't have any, actual RCT2 scenery pieces that fit that really well. So I ended up using the North America theming, and I thought the suburbia landscape ended up being pretty cool. So I ended up going with it. So a few buildings later, we're going to work on our next tracked ride. Is going to be the car ride, which at the other Fun Corporation parks would be Suburb Spin. The one at Funland still in operation, though the one at Joyland, with the construction of Xenon The Last Stand, no longer is running and has been removed from that park. But I wanted to switch it up a little bit, change the formula. So this car ride is very unique. I wanted it to be different enough, even like in real life, if you had a car ride that, just to maybe put a unique spin on. I wanted to give that a shot here, so I put 2 different stations on it. So it's gonna end up being themed to driving a taxi, and there's gonna be 2 separate stops. So it's like you get, on one side you drive it to the other side, and then you could get on the other station and drive it to the back to the first station. And there's really not much difference between that and like a railroad station, which we will get to eventually for this park. But the idea of being able to drive one of those antique cars between 2 stations, I thought was just really cool, and I didn't want to pass that up. With the completion of the track ride, we'll add a Hoos Rides break dance right there in the corner, which is going to be, loosely themed to street racing. And then we're going to add some theming in the queue paths for our taxi ride here. We're going to get our queue shade covered. Our queue covered with shade, I think, is a better way of phrasing that. And then put the roofs on top there, and then go back to the other side and do the exact same thing. Now, one of the 2 stations will be pretty identical, but just the rest of this part is just kind of filling out the blank spaces here with just some scenery pieces. I think it ended up looking okay. It kind of gives me the same feeling when I first put together the ones at Funland, where it just didn't feel horribly connected. However, the further in you get, and once you zoom out a little bit and get more of the park put together, I think it actually ends up looking all right. The different buildings here, again, just something for guests to look at as you drive by. If this was a real park, they'd be only one-sided. They'd probably use forced perspective, where you really only have the building put together on one side and have a couple set pieces put there. However, in-game, I just completed the entire set, because why not? And then we're going to start filling out the area with foliage as well. Get some trees in there. Make it look like there's more stuff in the background. And when you put foliage in the game, it really does a good job of kind of hiding any stuff you're missing. I think all in all, the car ride ends up looking pretty good. Gives guests things to look at when they're not necessarily driving the car, but, just riding in it. And then we're going to take another carbon copy of something from Funland, and these are the suburb houses. There's 2 of these at Funland, located near their Route 70 flying carpet ride. I like the idea of these. The thing I remember most about these is I was watching Shark Tank as I was putting these buildings together. And then there was the pitch for Be Somebody, so I remember laughing about that as I was building these. But anyway, just a couple of suburban houses fit in there, give the suburb feel a little bit. So you have the tram that goes to downtown, and then the other side of the tram goes to kind of the suburb area. So I think that's kind of cool. But then putting some finishing touches on here, we're going to get some fence put around the paths, because you really don't necessarily want guests just wandering around in ride areas. Not the most ideal thing. And then just kind of filling in some of those spaces a little bit and keeping your guests on the path, because if they walk on the grass, they're going to trample the grass, and the grass is going to go away. In game, not a big deal, but in real life, that would be something to kind of pay attention to. Then over here by the car ride, I had a blank spot. Just wanted to put something unique there. So squirrels are twitchy and cool, so we're going to put some squirrel shrubs in the middle there. Again, just putting some finishing details in here, but I think for the most part, we're going to look pretty good. Went back and added these pillars later, just to kind of put some maybe modern art feel there. Literally no other purpose beyond that for those. But every once in a while towards the end of the video here, you'll see me kind of zoom out. And what I'm doing when I do that is I'm just kind of taking a wide look at the area to see if there's anything extra I want to add. And then I'll zoom back in, put a couple extras in there. As you see, I went back and added some foliage. But that should just about do it for the downtown section. I will see you in the next one for our kids area. Thanks for tuning in.